Jess, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. Such an honor to be here.
Well, I just love you, and I've loved reading so many of your books and following you online. And we were just reminding each other that we met many a year ago at, I think, the
Yes.
only real conference I've been to on the mainland. That was such a big deal. And you've been busy doing a whole lot. So before we jump into this super important topic, can you just tell people a little about yourself, your family, what you do, and all the rest?
Yeah, absolutely. So I live in Charleston, South Carolina. My husband and I have four kiddos. We've got three teenagers and one almost teenager.
Mhm.
And we planted our church, Bright City Church, about 10 years ago, and we lead that together. I also run a small business called Go and Tell Gals, where I coach women in their calling. Specifically, I end up coaching a lot of women in the small business or publishing space, a lot of women in ministry and communicators, etc. And I love that, love my work I get to do there. And I also travel to teach and I write books. So, all of the things that I coach women in, I also find myself in. I'm
Mhm.
very multi passionate, I have multiple callings, but also just having a weird, wild life with my kiddos, and doing
Mhm.
life with our dog
Yeah.
and living the dream.
I love it. It is so good, and your whole story since you've started your work in ministry is just so inspiring, and it
Mm,
leads to today's topic really because, when you're doing a lot, you get tired. And I think everyone listening can relate. The minute I opened your book, Tired of Being Tired, receive God's realistic, important word there, rest for your soul deep
mm,
exhaustion. Such
yeah.
an important message. Maybe tell us what led you to this book, and also I'm curious, how many books have you written? I mean, you're young. You've written a lot of books already.
Oh, it depends on if you count Bible studies and devotionals, which I do. I because I
Mhm.
wrote them.
Oh,
So
yeah.
like they were an
Mhm.
undertaking. I've written 12 books. This will be my
Wow.
12th. Tired of Being
Wow.
Tired will be my 12th book. Yeah.
Incredible.
And yeah, so what led me to writing the book is the truth. I live a very full life, and I don't it is not a quiet or hushed life. I've never been to a silent retreat. I've never been to a sound bath. My life is full and it is loud and it's full of really beautiful God things, full of things that
Mhm.
God's invited me into. But like many people, I kept reading every book on rest I could get my hands on. Like I wanted to understand what's wrong with me. Why can't I figure this out?
Mhm.
Why can't I like create some rhythms that help me not feel so tired? Why am I continually feeling tired? And that really led me on a journey of investigation. I kind of came to this wall in my faith where
Mhm.
I read Matthew 11 where Jesus says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I'll give you rest." And I said, if that doesn't apply to me, if that doesn't apply, to a single mom in Kansas or a
Mhm.
woman who has to work two jobs or a college student, like what gives? What would this actually realistically look like
Yeah,
for people who want to take Jesus at his word and
totally.
experience a free
Mhm.
and light and restful life?
Oh, so relate to all of the above. And often because I too am doing so many different things and, people like my mom might say, "You're doing too much. You need to rest."
Yes.
And I'm like, "Honestly,
Yes.
everything I'm doing, I love, and I don't feel like any of it
Yeah.
is outside of God's will. It feels like I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to do, but yet there
Yeah.
can be that weariness that creeps in and you're like, "Does this mean I'm outside of God's will?"
Right.
Since you have dove in and done some research, have you found that this is across the board? Women are tired.
Yes.
Talk to us about that.
Statistically, that's what I've found. Women are tired. What's interesting is we have a very real, we can see in research, there's an exhaustion gap where women are consistently feeling and experiencing fatigue at
Mhm.
a heightened level compared to men. Women are also feeling more tired post-pandemic than they were pre-pandemic.
Mm.
I think that there were some things kind of put out of place in our body and our souls and our minds that we haven't really put back into place, that we haven't
Interesting.
really brought back into rhythm or wholeness. which is just honest. Our entire culture
Yeah.
is kind of warring against it and struggling with it. What that
Yeah.
might mean for people, if you think about how much more we were on our phones in the middle of the
Mm.
pandemic,
Mhm.
makes sense.
Mhm.
But
Same.
it's in, yeah, isn't that interesting? There's some actual real data like pre and post pandemic that we're more tired, which I mean, like even just to unpack that really quickly, we're home. People
Yeah.
started downloading TikTok.
Mhm.
We never went back.
Yeah.
We never went back to normal. We just normalized this new level of mental exhaustion
Yeah.
and lost maybe some of the more healthy patterns that would have helped us process or relieve ourselves or experience relief from our day. And now we don't do those anymore, and we just keep going back to our phones. And which
Wow.
I'm not out to villainize the phone,
Yeah.
but it's like you multiply that times
Mm.
5 or 6 or 7 other issues that we might be struggling with, and we're just more tired. So
Definitely.
I don't hate TikTok. I don't hate social media. I don't hate the phone. I hate that women turn to it when they're exhausted and it doesn't
Totally.
work,
Yeah.
you
Oh, yeah.
know?
Yeah, and I just have to say,
Yeah.
since you mentioned the difference between men and women, I also have to wonder if during the pandemic, we almost switched into this gear of as women, like we feel the need to protect everyone. And it's almost like we're on a heightened alert ever since then
Yes.
of like,
Yes.
we're not safe. Life isn't
Right.
necessarily going to look in the future like it does now. And so we have this heightened sense of just, I guess,
Exactly.
anxiety. Hate that word,
Yeah.
but it's
Which,
reality.
if you think about it, comes from something beautiful in us. It comes from a
Mm,
place of nurturing and
yeah.
wanting to cultivate and wanting to be a caregiver. That's a
Mm,
beautiful thing.
mm,
The problem is, and I think it was something, I mean, we could just talk about the pandemic for years. I think we probably all will be talking about it for years.
yeah.
But even something that I think may have like ignited in the pandemic is that culturally, everybody was really looking for someone to blame, and
Mm,
which comes through
yeah.
trauma. We were
Yeah.
experiencing a worldwide trauma and we
Hmm.
wanted somebody to be mad at.
Yeah.
But the problem is when we get in the habit of making people the enemy or blaming other people, then we do it in every area of our life. And I think collectively, a lot of women were like, if someone can be at blame for things not going well, it should be me. It will
Mm,
be me.
yeah.
And so maybe if it wasn't even
Mm,
related to things that happened in the pandemic, we still got in the habit of this like pendulum swing of blame and shame
yep.
that we don't know how to get off of now.
Wow, that's huge. Yeah,
Yeah.
there is a lot to unpack. Okay, so with women across the board feeling tired, why do you think or what have you found? Why don't we give ourselves permission to rest?
Okay. So this is the question right here. This is the most important question. Why don't we
Mhm.
give ourselves permission to rest? Um, the thing is, we have to completely reframe this question
Okay.
because we are looking for. I said it too, and I probably even said it going into writing the book. Like, how can I give women permission to rest? But the point is, we have already been given permission, and even more so, we've actually been invited to
Mm,
rest.
mhm.
So we are looking for how can we do enough so that we can get this pass that
Yep.
says, now you've earned it.
Mhm.
Now you can rest.
Like,
But once we're on the quest for that past, we'll never find it because it doesn't exist.
hmm.
Instead, what we will find is even in the way that God establishes the universe. In Genesis, we see that when He creates the day, He says there was evening and then there was morning the first day, meaning you don't have to live a day to get to night. You get rest right at the beginning.
Hmm.
And so for us, the question needs to be how can we earn this permission to rest? How can we find it? How can we give it to ourselves? How can we give it to other people? But how can we just receive the rest that is already ours for the taking?
Wow. That's that's big. And that's what you unpack here.
Yeah.
That's what you
Yes.
so so yeah, maybe can you lead us into that? Like how can we switch gears? Because
Yeah.
I'm a checklist girl. I'm a to-do list. I love checking
Yeah.
those things. And every once in a while I get to the end of the day and I'm like, I've earned some rest. Like I can actually hang with my
Yeah.
family tonight because I actually accomplished everything on the list. But if I haven't, I have this heaviness that interrupts my sleep, which is something else we could talk about because I loved as soon
Yep.
as I got to the part about sleep, I was like, okay, I this girl gets me. because sleep's a thing. And so,
Sleep is
yeah,
a thing.
yeah. Talk
Yeah.
to us.
Yeah. So, I mean, the reason why we don't have to earn our rest, it really is, this is such a spiritual issue. The book,
Mm,
Entired of Being Tired, it's wildly practical.
mhm.
I mean, I give lots and lots and lots of realistic, logistical ways to experience physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual rest.
Yep.
But there is some changing of our minds that needs to happen
Mm,
for us to come into agreement with some of those tactical things.
yep.
And what's crazy is that once you have your mind and your heart changed about rest as a concept, it
Mhm.
becomes less of like, oh, I've got to do these rhythms that will help me rest. And it
Yes.
becomes more of just an expression of our faith in the way that we live.
Mhm.
And so this idea that we have to earn our rest, it really is rooted in striving. And the enemy comes to kill and steal and destroy. And so he is the
Mhm.
one who's saying, like, I want you to work for it. I want you
Mhm.
to work for it.
Yeah.
And so the good news for us is that not only does God model rest for us, not only do we see our triune God resting in the Bible, God resting in the process of creation, Holy Spirit hovering over the water at creation.
Mm.
That word hovering is ruach, it means to rest. We see
Mm.
Jesus 22 different times at least in the New Testament, 22 different times at least, pull away from
Mhm.
active work. People who are waiting on him, who have expectations on him, who need healing. We see him
Wow.
pull away to
Wow.
rest, to be with the Father. When he only had 3 years to get the most important work of the world
Incredible.
done,
Right there.
he still rests.
Wow.
So not only do we have it modeled, but we are invited to it over and
Mm.
over and over in scripture. Psalm 127, God says, I give rest to those that I love. Why do you stay up working all day and working all night? I give rest to those that I love.
Oh.
So this is what I found. There are definitely seasons and there are definitely areas of our life where we can't escape being tired. And in fact, somebody said to me the other day, she was like, "So do you still get tired?" And I think she was trying to trap me a little bit. And I was like, "Listen, I'm alive. I'm a human.
Right.
I live under the effects of a fallen world. My body still gets tired. I live in 2024. So
Mhm.
mentally and emotionally, I'm going to be overwhelmed. The difference is now I rest before I get tired.
Mhm.
And when I do hit my own limitation or boundary and border, I do rest then too.
Mm.
And so we need our minds and our hearts changed from this kind of cultural idea. But that being said, there are really seasons where we can't avoid physical exhaustion or
Yeah.
we can't avoid mental exhaustion. But I
Mhm.
do think the hard part is that many of us are volunteering for the
Yes.
level of fatigue that we're at.
Totally.
We're not actually victims of it.
Oh, wow. I think that's huge, and I love what you talked about with just the perspective shift, really, because I think you and I both talk about this, and it's just across the board so huge for us as women, the whole understanding of taking our thoughts captive, and, God's
Yeah,
given us such a gift of being able to choose where we focus our thought life, but I love that when you just start to focus on Jesus's life and scripture and you're like, "Wait, maybe it's not so much about fighting what I shouldn't do, but about focusing on the right stuff," and that
yeah,
will shape
exactly.
our thoughts, and,
Exactly.
oh, that's so refreshing, really. It just is like, "Oh,
Mm,
I'm actually invited to rest. This is a gift."
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
I love it. So you mentioned seasons. We know that there's people listening who have newborn babies, sick kids,
Hmm.
all kinds of stresses and strains. How do you encourage people in that very real season where maybe their sleep is stolen, they can't even help that, to somehow find
Hmm.
the deeper, you talk about peace and rest together. Maybe
Hmm.
encourage someone out there who's like, I just am not getting enough sleep. How can I even deal with that?
100%. That's such a great question. So in the book, there's a chapter called Find Your Fatigue, and it
Mm,
really walks women through the process of figuring out what kind of tired they are.
mhm.
And the truth is that most of us don't know what kind of tired we are. And that's also why when we do try to rest, it might not be working,
Mm,
right?
interesting.
This is
Mhm.
also why, for example, when a woman has a newborn and everybody's like, just sleep when the baby sleeps. Well, the reason why most people can't sleep when the baby sleeps is because they're emotionally and mentally overwhelmed.
Mm,
So they're not even able to physically rest because
mhm.
number one, they need a place to process all the emotions, the
Yeah.
beauty, the trauma, the fear, the
Mhm.
anxiety. They need
Mhm.
a place to process that, but they're also probably mentally a little bit overwhelmed. They're
Yeah.
probably also a good bit spiritually fatigued
Yep. Mhm.
and are wondering like, oh my gosh, do I now have to raise this child to be a follower of Jesus? And what will I do? And how will I handle the existential crisis of having a child in this year? Well, it's so crazy and nuts. So all of that is actually making that mom tired. Does she need
Mm.
sleep? She does,
Sure.
100%.
But that's not all.
100%.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's not all she needs.
Wow.
And so knowing what kind of tired we are, I believe that most of us are living with kind of a white noise level of
Mm.
mental exhaustion and mental
Mhm.
fatigue that I think even taking some practical steps to combat that and to fight that and to get some mental rest in our lives will actually give us the mental clarity we need to figure out what other kind of tired we are.
That's
But
huge.
mental fatigue is what's keeping most of us from sleeping at night,
Yeah.
honestly, because we're
Yeah.
so overwhelmed and we're
Yeah.
so anxious and we have so much on our plates. And they all just end up all the different kinds of fatigues end up just like crossing over and layering and
Mhm.
keeping us from rest. But the good news is, as soon as we start to handle one, they
Mhm.
all do start to alleviate. And we then have the energy and the capacity to handle the others, which
Yes.
is really nice.
Totally. Okay, I love this. And now I'm moving into a little personal coaching since I got you here.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna take advantage.
Love.
But let's dive in
Let's
because there are
go.
so many areas of exhaustion and fatigue. But since you mentioned the mental fatigue, and since that's probably what I'm
Yeah.
dealing with, can you give us some practical tips for is it helpful to just like talk to somebody about all the things on our mind or journal it? Like, what's the best way to get it off the brain so that it doesn't show up in the nighttime?
Yeah. The good news is it really is as simple as you're saying. Like journaling is huge.
Mhm.
I actually said to somebody in an interview yesterday that I know that journaling doesn't work for everyone, but I personally don't know how people sleep without journaling. Like I
Mm.
don't, my brain has to capture, even if it's just in list form. Here's what I'm worried about. Here's what's on my mind. Here's what I have to do tomorrow.
Mhm.
So it was some kind of journaling habit, whether it's a notes app in your phone, a physical journal that you write in,
Yep.
where you capture, I would call it a brain dump. That's what I
Yep.
advocate for in the book. Some kind of
Mhm.
brain dump every day. This is what's on my mind. This is what I have to do. This is what's taking up space for me. But I think a big one with mental fatigue is watching what we do in the margins.
Hmm.
So most of us are really used to having noise or having
Mhm.
stimulation in the
Mhm.
margin of our life.
Yep.
And I say in the book, listen, full disclosure, I'm a girl who watches TV in the shower. It's my favorite rhythm. I don't plan on changing it. I have a nice little cutout in my shower where I stick my phone and it doesn't get wet and it
Oh,
makes
that's
me so
awesome.
happy. But that means for me to do that, I have to have other moments of
Yes.
mental margin where I can just capture my own thoughts, where I can just notice my own thoughts.
Yeah,
So this is like not grabbing our phone, when
constantly.
we're waiting for a table at a restaurant.
Yes,
It's as
yes.
simple as that.
I
And
love
again, I
that.
love the phone. I love social media. I'm not coming for it. But for example, in our house, we have a hard and fast, no phones in the bedrooms rule. And I
Mm,
tell my kids
mhm,
all the time, it's not because I'm like worried about you doing something sneaky on your phone. It's because you need physical spaces in
mm.
your life where there's no phone, where it's analog, where it's
Yeah,
digital free. And adults need the
we
same. We
do.
need physical spaces in our life that are totally analog.
We do.
So yeah, it's
I
as
love that.
simple as the simple things that we
Yeah.
know, you
No,
know?
I know it makes a difference because when I lie down, I'll often bring my little I use a paper planner still because 'cause I'm old school, and
Yes.
I if before I go to bed, I write down everything that's on my mind for the next day, I tend to sleep a lot better just by getting it off the brain
Yes.
and onto paper. And I also
Yes.
just love what you said because just a couple days ago, I'm trying all these different techniques to get myself to sleep better, and one thing I know is that when I wake up, once you turn on the brain and it starts going, it's really hard to stop it, so nipping it in the bud is
Yeah.
huge, and I'm learning to do that where I'm like,
Yeah.
"This is your time to rest. This is your time to turn off the brain." But the other night, I remember thinking of some random things, and a thought came into my mind. I was like, "Well, no wonder you do this. When else during the day do you have just space to just think about the things,
Right.
like all those random things?" And
Yeah.
so I love that you're saying this because it's just supporting what popped into my head. And I thought, whether it's taking a walk or I think a lot in the shower, so I know that's your TV
Yes.
time, but
That's
if
gonna
you're
be good for other people.
yes,
Yep.
doing the dishes, folding laundry, like, giving your brain that space because I think it does need to go to those places and process some
Yeah.
things that maybe aren't pressing, but they just pop up, and if you don't do it during the day, it's likely to happen at night, so that is
Totally.
huge. Okay, so
Totally.
we live in a time that really being busy is like you call it, a badge of honor. And I hate it
Mhm.
when people are like, "How are you?" And I'm like, "I'm so," and I start to say, "I'm so busy." And I'm like, "I don't wanna say it, but it's true." But how can we kind of maybe when maybe we won't change the world or change our culture, but how can we be cool with saying, "I'm not stressed," or "I'm restful?" Like, how can
Mm.
we
Yeah.
recoup that whole idea of, "This is okay. Let's be proud,"
I
no,
love that
proud of it
question.
in a good way.
That question. I call it busy shaming. Like
Mm. Ooh, I like that.
what makes me really uncomfortable, I think number one, you're hitting on something so important, and that's that like we're in a point in culture where our mouths like move to say
Mm.
that because we don't know how to like check in with our souls.
Mhm.
So I say busy, tired, but good. That's what I feel like people say. Busy, I'm tired, but I'm good. I'm busy,
Yeah, huh?
good. It's like it's just the narrative that we go to tell. So I think number one, we won't like immediately go to tell that narrative if we have enough mental and emotional rest so that we can actually know how we're doing. But that being said, I don't enjoy busy shaming. And what I mean by that is a lot of times I'll find people will say, like, well, I know you're busy, but
Ugh.
I know
Oh,
you're busy,
hate
but
that.
and I'll tell you what I've started doing if it's not awkward, if it's somebody that is in my life that I can speak life giving but truth to, what I'll say is, "Hey, I know what you mean, but just FYI, I'm not busy. I don't
Mm,
I don't live a busy or hurried life. My life is very full.
full.
It's
Mhm,
very full."
mhm.
And if I'm living busy, I don't want to be like that. Like I don't want to be
Yeah.
rushing from one thing to the next where I don't really have the margin to even know who I am anymore.
Yes.
And there are days like that and there are seasons like that and it happens and I get it, but I don't want that to be the norm of my
Mhm.
life. So
Yeah.
I'll clarify for people and even just this kind of goes into like how we order our lives and how we say no. So for example, if someone comes to me and invites me to do something or asks me to do something and I don't have any plans, but I have that time as margin,
Mm.
I might say I'm unable to do that, but I wouldn't say I'm busy because that's not true. And even if I
Hmm.
did have something to do, I can say like, thank you so much for asking me, but I'm unable to do that.
Good
And
word.
again, it like just kind of helps shift the narrative a little bit, but I do like rerouting that word and saying I'm not busy, but my life is full. It's full, it's abundant,
Yeah.
that's what John 10:10 purchased for us. So whether your
Yes.
calendar is full, you can still live a full life. But a lot of times we're not able to live into that abundant fullness if our calendars are too full. So there may need
Absolutely.
to be a little bit of editing that needs to happen. Yeah.
Yes, I so appreciate that, and that encourages me because I do feel that way. I live here on the
Mm.
North Shore of Oahu where it's a laid back culture, and
Yeah.
and there's a lot of women who, God bless them, but they hang out at the beach. They're, like, chilling. They're not striving, and so sometimes I feel like, in my culture, locally, I don't fit in, and so when people are like,
Yeah.
"Haven't seen you at the beach in a few months," I'm like, maybe it's just not my priority right now." Like, it's not that I'm
Yeah.
too busy. I could go today, but
Yeah.
maybe I don't
Yeah.
want to. So it's that.
Yeah. Listen, I'm the exact I live at the beach too, and I haven't been in months. And to me, I just start to know like, okay, I need to go to the beach. I
Right.
need to do that for me. For
Yes.
me. But a lot of times it goes back to the question of balance, and women will say, like, how
Mhm.
can we live a balanced life?
Yes.
And number one, my favorite reminder is like Jesus did not live a balanced life.
Mm.
Like he was all about the kingdom. There was no
Mhm.
balance there. He was
Yeah.
all about the kingdom. Now he rests. He had
Mhm.
healthy rhythms. He
Yep.
had boundaries. He went to weddings. He
Mhm.
lived a full life, but it
Yeah.
wasn't like this little like scale of like work
Oh,
and
yeah.
play. Like it was
Mm.
all about the kingdom. And
Oh,
we can be all about the kingdom in our rest and all about the kingdom in our work and all about the kingdom in our margin too.
yes, I love that, and I think too, and I know you acknowledge this, but just being aware of your personality, we're all wired differently. Some of us are happiest when we're I don't want to say it, busy. Happy is when we're doing a lot of things, when
Yes,
our life is
absolutely.
full. And I think that's me. It
Yeah.
gets I enjoy it all. But yes, being
Yeah.
intentional about rest. Well, you mentioned the kingdom. So the last thing before I let you go, let's talk about spiritual exhaustion. And of course, people are going to find all this in the book, but any tips for
Yeah.
somebody right now today that's like does a little eval and says, I think I'm spiritually exhausted. What's the first step they can take?
Mm. I would have that person write down a list of everything they are doing for God.
Mm.
What is everything you are doing for God?
Mhm.
And then I would have them evaluate that list and say, does God need you to do any of that?
Hmm.
Did he invite you to do any of that? And maybe is some of these things actually rhythms or invitations that God wants for you,
Hmm.
but not that he needs from you.
Hmm.
But the problem with spiritual exhaustion is that we get into this mindset of thinking of ourselves almost like factory workers in the kingdom. Like
Mm.
we have to do this for God. We have to lead for God. We have to serve for God. We have to read the Bible for God. But God is good. He is taken care of, and
Mhm.
he is not spinning or striving or wringing his hands, wondering how it's all going to get done.
Right.
And he loves when we spend time in his word, but he loves it because it's for us. And he
Mm.
loves when we spend time in prayer and in community and in church, but that's because it's for us. It's not
Mm.
something he wants from us. So I think even just noticing the things that we think we're doing for God and
Mhm.
asking, like, did he tell us to do those? Did he invite us to do those? Does he really need us to do those? Or are they an invitation for us to
Mhm.
experience his kingdom, his joy, his
Mhm.
peace, and even like kind of rerouting those purposes will help us show up in those rhythms and in those areas, but with maybe a little bit more freedom based
Mhm.
mindset.
Oh, that's huge. I love it. Thank you. That's Yeah,
Yeah.
and of course, there's other areas of exhaustion you already touched on that everyone can dive into, and just to evaluate, you talk about finding your fatigue, figure it out, and then do something about it. Like, that's one thing I
Yeah.
know is you don't wanna sit in that place. You wanna move
Yep.
forward and find a healthier rhythm, and yeah, you talk about rhythms of rest. That's all such good stuff. So I'm gonna let people just find that in the book. Any final words of encouragement? If someone's listening, they're just like on their fourth cup of coffee and they're exhausted. What's your word
Yep.
of encouragement you can leave us with?
Oh, I just want to say number one, if you're tired, if you're exhausted, shame off you. It's not because you're
Mm.
doing it wrong. It's not because you don't have your life together. I call the book Tired of Being Tired because really my hope is that women will get to a place where they say, I don't think I was made to live like this. I
Mhm.
actually am tired of feeling this way. I know
Mhm.
I'll get tired again. I know I'll feel fatigued again, but I don't want to live like this. I
Mhm.
don't want to accept this as my reality. And it really, truly does not have to be our reality. Jesus did not die for us to live a life of punitive exhaustion. We don't have
Mm.
to pay him back with our fatigue.
Mm.
There is another way.
Mm. Good word. I love it. And I really
Mm,
appreciate that you took the time to write this book. I think it's going to help a lot of people. So,
thank you.
absolutely. Well, like I mentioned, I love following you. I love your website, by the way. I was just like revisiting. I
Thank
visited over the
you.
years and I'm like, that is the most beautiful website. So everyone needs to go
Oh,
check it out. You've done a great
thank
job.
you.
Um,
Thank you.
you have great hair. I like literally was
I love you,
like if I
Monica.
could, she's got, you guys just go check her out. Just
It's so
beautiful hair
encouraging.
that's like,
Oh
my
my
hair won't get
gosh.
long like that. Like it just stops at some point. But you've got great long hair.
So kind.
Yeah, other fun things that I think you've got just great stuff on your website. I didn't realize that you watch TV in the shower, but West Wing is your
I do.
favorite. I've never watched West Wing in my life. I don't know why.
Okay,
Where have I
well,
been?
you have to start today.
Okay, is it family friendly? Like with my 13-year-old, is it good for him or not so much? Because I feel
Yeah,
like whatever we
I
watch, our
would
kids
say
watch.
too much younger than 13, I wouldn't, but 13's
Okay.
fine. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
So, and you're a beach family like us, but we're about as far
I
on the
know.
beach as we could get from one another. So
I
maybe one
know.
day we'll meet at one of
One
our
day we'll meet
beaches.
on one side. Yes.
That would be so great. Well, where can people find and follow you right now if they're not already?
JessConnolly.com is my website, and Jess A. Connolly is all my social media, Instagram, Facebook, all the things.
Perfect. We'll be linking to all that in show notes. Jess, thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's an honor.
Awesome. We'll talk soon.